Someone just said they're unsubscribing from me. Thank God, please. Because if you believe in they and thems, you're part of the problem.
About 100,000 people have unfollowed me this week for speaking about Charlie, the entire thing. I can't believe so many people in America are cheering and praising his death. It's honestly disgusting.
The revolt against woke insanity just got an unlikely new champion. We're going to talk about the beauty influencer Jeffree Star, who just turned against the fringe left, and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, guys, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about the influencer Jeffree Star, who I have to tell you I'm not very familiar with. I know he's a gay influencer. I know he's big in the beauty community. I know he sells makeup. And I know he's been around for like a very, very long time. But he's not super political, though he's chimed in on a couple things over the years and now has decided to officially just drop some truth bombs and doesn't care what kind of backlash he's getting. So he actually went viral for some TikTok lives of him that got clipped up and then got invited on Piers Morgan Uncensored. So we're going to take a look at a couple clips of him on there. Here's the first one where Piers kind of sets up what's going on with Jeffree's revolution, or I guess you could call it evolution. Take a listen.
We're going to bring in another guest now, Jeffree Star, who's a cosmetics influencer. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, Jeffree. You've gone viral. You've gone viral this week for this TikTok live.
He encouraged everyone to speak about their beliefs, whether he believed them or not. Am I a Republican? No, I'm a person. Because I'm standing up for someone that passed away, I'm now being called names in the chat. This is what's wrong with a lot of you people. You will never get far in life. You are sick in the head. Someone just said they're unsubscribing from me. Thank God, please. Because if you believe in they and thems, you're part of the problem. If you're so stupid enough to go against science, please unfollow me.
Jeffree, what happened to you as a consequence of that going viral?
So about 100,000 people have unfollowed me this week for speaking about Charlie, the entire thing. I can't believe so many people in America are cheering and praising his death. It's honestly disgusting. So while I was live streaming, I found out about what happened in real time, and it was so horrifying and devastating. I followed him for a few years. Do I agree with everything he's ever said? Of course I don't. But I loved a lot of what he said, and it resonates with me. But the good news is hundreds of thousands of more people have followed me, and they're on the exact same page. So I don't care about the following. It's not about that. I just had to speak my mind.
So I just find this so funny because, guys, audio listeners, you have to understand, Jeffree Star is the most non-binary looking guy that you could ever imagine. But yet he makes fun of non-binary and acknowledges that it doesn't exist and that he's a male, but it's okay for him to have colorful hair and wear makeup and everything. And I love that. As somebody who's pushed back against the regressive nature of all that gender ideology, but doesn't believe in like traditional gender stereotypes and roles, I think he's actually spot on about all of that. And then I have to say, I find it very concerning that he did these TikTok lives and they're kind of crazy to watch because all these random animations pop up like crazy when people are sending gifts and all that. But he does these and so many people tune in, and he reacted live to Charlie being killed. Charlie Kirk, of course, and was like, oh, that's horrible. That's horrific. Can't believe anyone would do that. And 100,000 people unfollowed him. That is really concerning. I mean, these people just hate America, hate what we believe in, hate our way of life, hate the fact that we're against terrorism. I really don't know. I find that to be disturbing, but I guess the good news is that he found a bunch more people who do appreciate his content and do agree with him that whatever our differences are, whatever our disagreements are, violence is not the answer. I feel like the bar is on the floor here. The bar is in hell, but Jeffree Star at least is meeting that basic bar. Now, their conversation continued in a couple interesting ways. Do make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button, yada, yada, yada. And now let's take a look at this second clip featuring Jeffree.
Have you been surprised, shocked, depressed by the reaction? I'm genuinely stunned. I thought I'd seen everything in the news game going back 40 years. But to see the outpouring of gleeful celebration of a young man's murder for expressing his opinions, and a young man who would deliberately go into the opposition territory, college campuses, and get people to line up and say, come on argue with me in a respectful way. The idea that he gets murdered for doing that all the time seemed particularly perverse to me. Were you?
Exactly.
How did you feel about it?
I was honestly horrified because I'm someone that's always been outspoken. I love the truth, and for some reason, people are afraid of the truth. I've been told all week, he would have hated someone like you. No, he would have respected me because I'm my own person and I know how to have my own thoughts. So when I saw it in real time, I was completely devastated. I can't believe someone that has an opinion is now dead. It's disgusting.
This is so interesting to me because Jeffree Star here is able to make a basic connection that some other public influencers and commentators just seem either unwilling or unable to make, which is that anybody who says their opinion in public for a living, there's going to be people that disagree with you. So you should be against people being murdered for their opinions, even if you really don't like that opinion, even if you find that person very gross, very icky. Doesn't matter. You, just in the spirit of your own self-interest, you shouldn't stand for that. And then it's interesting. People are being like, to Jeffree, that's the big pushback that he's getting for being against Charlie Kirk being murdered. Well, he would have hated you. He would have hated somebody that looks like you or somebody like you that's a feminine gay man that wears makeup or whatever. And there's two things there. I'm not even sure that that is true. But even to the extent that it is true, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm still against terrorism, even for people who maybe would have had negative views about me. That's like just basic morality. The idea that, if people have bad opinions, it's okay to do horrific things to them, I'll never believe. Sorry, not sorry. And I don't know Jeffree Star, but it sounds like he's got some basic common sense. Now, there was another guest on this panel, the amazing Lucas, who I covered in another video on the channel. He mocked Charlie Kirk being killed and even mocked his widow. And he decided to try to derail Jeffree's common sense by just bringing up unrelated controversies and scandals. Listen to this.
Also, is this the same Jeffree Star that said the N-word and called black women nappy-headed?
I want to ask one thing of Jeffree before we finish this. Jeffree, there was an allegation from Lucas there that you've used the N-word. Do you want to respond to that? I think it's fair that you respond.
I've never called a black person that. That's been debunked. And the second thing you said, I've never said before. So please stop lying. We have
video evidence of it.
So I found this strange. Does it matter? I mean, what Jeffree's saying is that he was against terrorism and was horrified that Charlie Kirk was killed and some other common sense opinions. If he had said something bad in the past, would that make his points or his argument any more true or any less true, any more or less correct? This just seems like a diversion tactic, a cheap distraction. And then, of course, it's also misleading. So, for example, I went and I checked and I tried to find any proof that he'd called black women nappy-haired or anything like that. I wasn't able to find any. Maybe it's out there somewhere, but that wasn't something I was able to find. And then he said the N-word. I mean, there's a world of difference between one, we got to stop acting like this word is just, so if someone ever uttered it once, they're irredeemable for the rest of eternity. That's ridiculous. It's not that deep, especially when people are young and dumb. They say stupid crap. But Jeffree, I believe the instances of him saying it in the past were not him calling a black person it in anger, which would be the actual evil use of that word, right? And it's just true that in the early 2000s and the late 90s and even the early 2010s, people used that word a lot more casually in everyday conversation. And maybe we think that's bad or whatever. Maybe that's offensive, but it was extremely common, and you can't just hold that against someone forever. If they ever participated in that, they're evil for the rest of their life. That it's really not true. And unless you have evidence that they're actually a racist person in some meaningful way today, I just don't care. That's me, at least. But what do you guys think? Are you surprised to see this message coming from Jeffree Star, of all people? Are you a fan of Jeffree? Do let me know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Hit the like button, yada, yada, yada. Oh, and remember, you can send in your voicemails for my Voicemail Friday episodes where I react to your woke horror stories, give you advice on your personal life scenarios, and answer any questions you guys have for me. Up next, we're going to talk about a Yet another hate crime hoax spreading like wildfire on TikTok. All across TikTok, people are convinced that a black man was lynched on a college campus, hung by racists who hate him and want to kill him. That is what lynching refers to. It's a horrific practice in American history that was used against black people. And according to woke TikTok, is still happening today. It's not, of course, and we'll go over that. But first, here's one of these videos telling this horrible story that totally happened. Take a listen.
Enough about Charlie Kirk. Let's talk about Trey Reed. This morning around 7 a.m., there was a student at Delta State University found hanging from a tree. A black student hanging from a tree. It's not getting nearly enough coverage, but let me give you some of the details. Trey Reed was a 21-year-old student at Delta State University. This morning, he was found hanging from a tree by a faculty member. It was reported as a suicide, which is BS. There had been multiple incidents before this, according to his cousin, where there were people at this school who were very racist and homophobic and transphobic, etc., etc. Not only that, something that they're not talking about. He wasn't just hanging from a tree. His arms and his legs were broken. And he had bruises on his body. That does not sound like a suicide. If you haven't woken up to what's going on in this country right now, wake the fuck up.
Wow. So in this person's telling, and this video has more than 1 million views and nearly 300,000 likes, so it's spreading like wildfire on TikTok, we've got a modern day lynching, of course, happening at Delta State University, which is a HBCU, a historically black college and university. So it's primarily black students, primarily black administrators. A terrible lynching happened. This man was brutalized and then hung in some sort of racist tag. And this is what America is coming to today. Unfortunately, actually, rather fortunately, none of it is true. This man was found hanging. It was apparently a suicide, but much of the other details here are not accurate. And it was not, in fact, a lynching of any kind. So here's a fact check from The Grio. Fact check. Did the student found hung from a tree at Delta State University have broken bones? The Bolivar County coroner said there were no broken bones or injuries consistent with an attack on Demetravion Trey Reed. A full autopsy is pending. So the Bolivar County, Mississippi coroner's office said in a statement released Tuesday, September 16, that a preliminary death investigation found that there were no signs of broken bones or assault on the body of Demetravion Trey Reed, the 21-year-old student found hanged early Monday morning on the campus of Delta State University, according to the Clarion Ledger. Based on the preliminary examination, we can confirm that the deceased did not suffer any lacerations, contusions, compound fractures, broken bones, or injuries consistent with an assault. At this time, there is no evidence to suggest the individual was physically attacked before his death, read the statement from the coroner's office. But all across TikTok, millions of people are being told that this man was beaten up, brutalized, and had his bones broken before being hung in public. Just, of course, literally did not happen. Right? But misinformation, especially when it plays to any sort of identity victim narrative, just spreads and spreads and spreads on TikTok. And people don't call it out or correct it or even check it, I guess, before sharing it to millions of people. So the whole allegation, right, is that it's a cover-up, right? They're covering up this. And it doesn't even make sense. The campus police at Delta State University have said that there's no evidence of foul play. And the campus police are the campus police of an HBCU, the head of the campus police who said there's no foul play. I'm going to put a picture of him up on screen. Tell me what you notice. This is Lieutenant Colonel Mike Peeler. He's not giving mayonnaise monster to me, actually. These are not evil white supremacists. These are black campus officials and police officers and officials saying there's nothing to see here. Why on earth would they want to cover up a horrific hate crime if that's actually what happened? It's not what happened. And these TikTokers are so incredibly sloppy and careless with the information they spread. I want to show you another video where this guy talks about 2 black men being hung, and he's 0% correct, but he's only even correct about the race of one of the two. Listen to this.
Yesterday morning, Monday morning, there were 2 black men that were hung by a tree. Neither one of them is getting national media attention, and neither one of them is being investigated properly. But neither one of them was a f***ing suicide. Trey Reed was found at Delta State University. His cousin has stated that he was found with 2 broken arms and a broken leg, and he was beaten. And they are saying that there was no foul play. And then Corey Zukatis, apologies if I'm pronouncing that last name wrong, was found near a Star casino, both of them being in Mississippi. And for Corey as well, they're saying that no foul play has been found. You're telling me there's no cameras? On a college campus, there's no cameras? Huh? And this is what folks mean when they say Charlie Kirk's words are violent, are dangerous. Because the second after that no gum ass bitch died, the folks on the right are targeting HBCUs, targeting black people. And then a couple days later, 2 black men are hung by a tree. Coinky dink? I think the not. But say their names because we know the media outlets won't. Them labeling these lynchings as self-inflicted suicide, they won't need to report it ever again. They won't have to bring it into the national media outlets. The story will become dead and no justice will be served because these are not suicides.
Wow, so there's so much there, but Corey Zukatis, one of the guys you mentioned there, is a white dude. It's a white dude that they're saying was lynched because of hate against black people fomented by Charlie Kirk. Gotcha. That makes a ton of sense. And he added an update to his post, this Cole guy. Update, Corey may have been white. However, don't use that. Invalidate the injustices, especially as Trey Reed was not white. Justice for Trey Reed and Corey Zukatis. Update. Half of what I said was totally wrong, but don't use that to invalidate the injustices I hallucinated. Like, this is crazy. He's spreading the misinformation that this Trey guy was beaten up, broken bones, all that. It's not true, according to the literal authorities and the people that examined the body. Whatever rumor they heard about what a cousin said doesn't, in fact, make it true or factual. And then one of the dudes is literally a white person. So the whole narrative, all of this is all across TikTok about these horrific hate crimes. None of it's real. And it's actually really bad and really harmful to get people worked up for no real reason, to convince people that America's this dark and dangerous and hateful place where they're being targeted, let alone to blame Charlie Kirk. That's truly bizarre and unhinged. But they do this with no repercussions, no consequences, because again, we are in an internet media ecosystem where people do not hold the creators that they watch and listen to accountable. You need to remember that your attention is your currency. So when people lie to you or mislead you or prove that they are sloppy and they don't fact check and they don't do their homework, you have to stop watching them. Even if they're funny, even if they're cool, even if you like them, doesn't matter. Because if you don't, they'll just keep misleading you and we'll all get dumber and more misinformed. But again, I guess that's kind of par for the course for TikTok these days, because they're spreading yet more hate crime hoaxes, which is so harmful for so many reasons. Of course, it's harmful for just like alarmism and getting people worked up unnecessarily. I also think, though, it's pretty profoundly insulting to the actual victims of hate crimes and racist incidents and the like, which of course still do happen. Well, when you're constantly making shit up, it is actually a slap in the face to real victims. That's my take, at least. But I don't know. Maybe that's just my white privilege or something. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you heard these hate crime hoaxes that are being spread all over the internet? Have you heard about them? Let me know. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button while you are at it. Next, I want to talk about the fallout after Jimmy Kimmel was fired by ABC, or effectively had his show canceled due to a ton of backlash over some inaccurate claims he made about Charlie Kirk's killer. He implied that the Charlie Kirk killer was MAGA and that the right was just in denial, when in fact we know that the killer was a left-wing radical who targeted Charlie potentially because of his hateful views about trans issues and the like. Now, this, of course, has sparked this huge backlash. And frankly, I covered this in a breaking news video on my channel last night when it happened. But I have no problem with Jimmy Kimmel being fired. I don't think he's funny. I don't think he's good at his job. I think what he said is lame, but I am bothered by the federal government explicitly pressuring ABC to fire him, which they did. The FCC chair actually was very explicit about this, Brendan Carr. He even used the words, I'm not kidding, this is a real quote, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," when threatening their member stations' licenses, FCC licenses to broadcast over the airwaves if Jimmy Kimmel was not fired. That to me is a form of government coercion and bullying that raises serious censorship and free speech concerns. But some people are kind of denying this, and I wanted to talk about it. In particular, Sean Hannity, the Fox News star. He made some comments on this that I found eyebrow-raising, and him in particular I find as a strange person to be cheering on what's happening to Jimmy Kimmel, because it could very easily backfire against Sean Hannity himself, and I'm going to explain why. First, here's the clip of Hannity.
Now, President Trump, he did react to this news on Truth Social, writing in part, quote, "Great news for America. The ratings challenge Jimmy Kimmel's show is canceled. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Kimmel has zero talent and worse ratings than even Colbert, if that's possible." Now, the left already, starting with Humpty Dumpty, fake news, CNN, J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom, predictably claiming this is conservative censorship. The MAGA crowd, Donald Trump got Jimmy Kimmel. That is false. I can't find a single prominent conservative voice in the country that even remotely wanted or hoped or was pushing to get Jimmy Kimmel taken off the air. Nobody. It just was simple. People changed the channel. They didn't watch him. Not one person can I think of. Maybe there's one, but I can't think of them.
So this is strange from Sean Hannity, because he is later in the show about to interview Brendan Carr, Trump's head of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. And Brendan Carr himself had that day very explicitly warned that they needed to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel or their licenses would be in danger. So he's a very prominent conservative in a position of power that Hannity is set to interview, yet Hannity is saying nobody asked for this. That doesn't quite add up there, Sean. And Hannity interviewed Brendan Carr this very show, and Carr did a victory lap, and he made it pretty clear, actually, that they did have a role in this. Take a listen.
Same thing with Kimmel. They're now facing the consequences of the choices that they made to appeal to a very, very narrow audience. Again, you can do that. You can start a podcast. You can go on YouTube. But if you're going to have a license from the FCC, we expect you to broadly serve the public interest.
So sorry, I do have a problem with this. I do have a problem with the federal government, in this case, the Trump administration, and Brendan Carr, essentially bullying a private media company to taking one of that government's critics off the air, dangling the threat of revoking licenses away if they don't. I have a serious issue with that. I think that's a form of censorship. I think that likely violates the First Amendment. And you cannot simply point to the rules about serving the public interest on the books at the FCC as justification for that, because that was never supposed to be about targeting speech based over political differences or disputes in how the coverage is done. Now, you know who used to believe that? Brendan Carr himself. Let me read you a tweet from him in 2019. Should the government censor speech it doesn't like? Of course not. The FCC does not have a roving mandate to police speech in the name of the public interest. And yet here we are, a few years later, that he is in power doing the same thing. That's what we call hypocrisy, folks. What's so even more glaring about Brendan Carr's hypocrisy on this issue is that when the Biden administration pressured social media companies to remove people's political speech or what they thought was misinformation or inaccurate information about things like COVID, Brendan Carr very explicitly decried that as an attack on freedom of speech and a violation of the First Amendment. Here he was in an interview with Glenn Greenwald several years ago.
At the same time that they were sort of going beyond merely flagging certain types of posts, they were going right to political speech, and they were doing so with a carrot and a stick right there. There's an entire line of Supreme Court cases called actually the jawboning line of cases, where if you're a federal official and you are pressuring a private entity to censor another private entity, well, then effectively the First Amendment is in fact invoked. And I think that this is one where Justice Alito in our Supreme Court in dissent was right in one of these recent cases where the majority said, we don't think there's enough there to really demonstrate that there was sort of official government pressure that crossed the line.
Chairman Carr, you're doing the same exact thing. The hypocrisy is astounding, and I think conservatives and Republicans cheering on this tactic will live to regret it, because the same logic that's being used here to silence Jimmy Kimmel and own the libs could absolutely, and most likely will be at this point, be used by a future Democratic administration to get conservative talk radio hosts kicked off the air that they say are not serving the public interest or spreading lies, including Sean Hannity, who hosts a massive radio show in addition to his Fox News show. Well, guess what? All the stations locally that run that show and air that show, they're licensed by the FCC. And the next FCC, when you're no longer in charge, if they get away with doing this, could very well do the same thing to target the voices that you like on the venues and platforms that you prefer. I think it's a huge mistake. I think it's a dangerous precedent, and I think it's totally at odds with freedom of speech and the First Amendment. But that's just my take. Don't take me off air for it, Mr. Carr. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Hit the like button, yada, yada, yada. And that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll talk again real soon.